Greetings and welcome to another edition of Trinity Radio. I am Jonathan Pritchett. Along with me is
Braxton Hunter. And because today we're talking about the Abrahamic religions, I'm wearing my Tri-Torah, It's the Real Thing t-shirt that I got in Jerusalem. It is the real thing. Mm-hmm. So we're asking the question today, why I'm a Muslim. I mean, I'm not a Muslim, but a lot of other people are. So
it's not heresy.
It's heresy.
Wow! They gave us nothing but tradition and no argument. All they did was get on this stage, yell real loud, and set a straw man on fire.
Okay, now I was not impressed. I've never heard of this gentleman before, but.
And there is no evidence at all, except in the imagination of Dr. Braxton and like-minded thinkers, that there is such a thing as an objective morality.
All right, well, that was a very passionate speech by Professor Alvarez. However, let me point out a couple of things that I have not argued tonight that Professor Alvarez seems to think that I have argued.
Everything that begins to exist must have a cause for its existence.
On behalf of humanity, God became man to die for the sin of the world. Then, because of that sacrifice, you can rise from the dead just like he rose from the dead.
And we're back. And before we begin, we need to have a second of silence for Neil. The fish did not survive the trip, so let's have a second of silence. Great. So, unfortunately, Neil busted up with the very poor packaging.
Yes, actually, Neil is fine. Yeah. Neil himself is fine. For those that don't know, there was an obnoxious, hideous statue of a bronze-colored fish that sat behind us for a little while in here, but also in our webinar rooms while we were teaching courses here at Trinity for years and years and years. That Neil has got, and we named him in honor of Neil deGrasse Tyson because we thought to name him during something where I was talking about Neil deGrasse Tyson. So anyway, we said the first person to give $100 to our Patreon. By the way, we appreciate our Patreon folks, and I read them all out on the last episode, but just so you know, we really appreciate you, and we'll have that up on the screen. Go ahead if you're on the YouTube channel and take a look at these fine folks who support Trinity Radio financially.
Wonderful people.
I love every last one of them.
Absolutely. More than people who don't give.
Well, you know, my thoughts about other people that don't give,
we love them.
No comment.
Not as much.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not commenting on them.
We love everybody that watches the show.
But I want everybody to be sure that I really love these people.
That's right.
Yeah, I love you all. Anyway, so we said whoever gave the first $100 or more donation would receive Neil in the mail. Because we wanted to get rid of him, and we the lady at the post office, we were both there. We told her what we were doing, and she tried really hard to package Neil such that he would be fine, but he did not make the transit well. And Robert Gillier now has him, and the fixture is in pieces. My understanding is Neil is fine.
Yeah.
I don't know what will become of him from this point forward.
Yeah.
But I've got a feeling there's probably a landfill somewhere
right.
near where Robert lives where Neil will rest in peace, says.
Yes.
That occurred to me mid-transit. Okay,
right.
So enough about Neil. But if you'd like to support our Patreon account, that's how we are able to do what we're doing.
That's
and you can visit us at patreon.com/Trinity Radio.
There you go.
And or you can click up here somewhere around where L. Ron Hubbard is. Not that we support L. Ron Hubbard.
And everyone, including Robert, who received Neil, they all got their first round of books, and hopefully that's exciting. I hope they enjoy those reads. And
we've gotten a few new patrons just since last week, so thank you to you folks who have come on board. All right, today we are finally talking about why people are Muslims. Now, here's the problem. The problem is you would think the size and scope of religion that Islam is today, that there would be a lot of really great Wayama videos. And there are a lot of Wayama videos.
Yeah, or
not a lot of great Wayama
why I'm
videos.
Not something.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of
And
Wayama.
we got to get into those too.
Well, save it for next season, you know? Yeah. Well. But you're right. There's a lot of those out there too.
Yeah, a lot of why I'm not a Christians now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, those, and the reasons are dumb, so we got to get into those.
So,
I mean, we could spend a whole season on just that.
I'm planning on it.
Yeah.
Hint, hint.
Knock down all these bad reasons why they're no longer Christian.
Right.
Yeah. But why these people are Muslims? Very limited in the video content for why people are Muslims.
Yeah, in fact, I had to go to a Huffington Post article to get some actual, real, stuff. But you're not going to get in this video what you really, really want, which is like a debate with somebody like Shabir Ali, who's a Muslim apologist. But I'll tell you what we will do. We will set things up a little bit. You'll recall in the Hinduism episode and in the Scientology episode and the Mormon episode, we gave a little bit of background about the religion ahead of time, and since that's Dr. Pritchett's favorite thing about the show, we're going to do a little bit of that today. Is that all right with you, Dr. Pritchett?
Yes, I'm always happy for you to take over teaching, and if you tap twice on your smartphone, it'll fast forward.
Yeah, you could do that. You could.
No, you got to listen to this stuff because
I honestly don't. That's fine.
No, everyone needs to listen to this stuff because a lot of people just don't know the basic stuff. Islam is what they read about in the news and what they see on memes. There's always a meme. So I have a lot of friends that not fan of Muslims, and I see a lot of memes that come across about not a religion of peace, and it'll show some Arab guy stepping on the head of a baby or something like that, and there's always these kind of memes, but these aren't what you find in these videos.
And another thing to keep in mind as we talk about this is I'm not worried here in Evansville, Indiana.
Yeah.
I'm not worried that the lady in the burqa that I see at Walmart is that I'm in danger. And there are reasons for that we're probably not going to get into in this show about how Muslims are supposed to, according to the Quran, how Muslims are supposed to act in different places, different contexts, at different times, in different countries. However, depending on what's going on in that country and whether they're the majority or the minority. However, all that being said, I'm not worried about it. And I don't think those people in our town necessarily, these very Western Muslims, are I think they would be as appalled at some of these things as others are.
Right.
But that's a different question from what the Quran says.
Yeah, and it's a different question altogether from why these people are saying they're Muslims.
Right.
And little to do with the Quran.
Right.
Other than it's the basic thing they say about it, which would sound like a Christian talking about the Bible in some cases. But what I find interesting, you have been interviewed on the local news about Islam.
Oh, that's a great thing to bring up.
Yeah.
I forgot. Yeah, we, first of all, we did receive, I think at one point, some kind of a threat in the mail.
Yes.
I mean, for real, cut out picture of letters and stuff. But
like in the movies.
Yeah, but really what prompted it was, I don't remember what exactly happened. There was some terrorist attack or something in the world, and so they wanted a comment from me as the president of Trinity, and they wanted a comment from the guy at the local mosque, which we have down the road in Newburgh near where you live. And so I talked for about 20 minutes, and I kept saying, is this what you want to hear? You want more? Yeah, man, you're doing great. Just keep it up. So I talked about everything that was wrong with the Quran, everything that we find inconsistent about the person and character of Muhammad, everything that is theologically problematic about their understanding of God.
And you kept telling them, because they were kind of shocked, you were like, now I'm just talking about the worldview. I'm not commenting about...
That's right. I was clear about that.
Yeah, not commenting about what people
people in Evansville.
Yeah, or what people do in the name of Allah and in the name of Islam that many Muslims would not appreciate.
Right. And they even asked me, should you be worried about the lady at Walmart with the burqa? And I said, no. So anyway, we talked about all that, but they asked me toward the end of their interview, do you think, because we were talking about Christianity, they brought it back around to Christianity and people bombing abortion clinics and stuff, and they asked me, do you think that some people do things in the name of Christianity that, in the name of your religion, that is not representative of that religion? And I said, yes. There are people that do things in the name of religion that are not specifically taught in that religion. Well, they hacked out everything that I said about Islam and made it sound like the whole interview was, what do you think about Islam? Well, people do stuff in the name of religion that's not what that religion teaches, which is not what I said.
Right. And what's interesting, though, about that whole...
James White is right. If you're ever going to be interviewed, you get a copy of the interview. That's the only way you agree to do the interview. Right. I want a copy of the unedited interview.
Yeah. Or you just set up your own camera.
Mark it down. I should have listened to James White.
Yeah, or just set up your own camera and say, this is going to film this so that you don't taking.
And there have been subsequent news interviews in our city that I've done in which I have recorded the thing.
Yeah. And so you did.
Yeah.
Follow James White's advice.
I'm
But what's interesting about this for me is that, okay, first of all, Christians who blow up, how often does that happen?
I do not know.
Christians
not
blowing
very
up.
often.
Hardly ever.
Right.
It's almost to the point where it's a strong. I mean, even Bill Maher was interviewed a few years ago saying, "Yeah, Christians aren't dangerous.
Right.
Drop that moral equivalence.
Yeah.
There's no moral equivalence here." And then one of the differences is when a Christian bombs an abortion clinic, he's acting contrary to the founder of
That's absolutely right.
When somebody kills in the name of Allah, sorry, but you're acting consistently with the founder of your religion.
So that's absolutely right. And so what we're going to do here is I'm going to give you a little bit of a background, more of a historical background than talking about the specific theological issues. We will talk about some of those when we get into the section where we respond to what people say. Mm-hmm. But what about Muhammad's early life? Islam began when the Christian Byzantine and the Persian empires were in power. In 570 AD, Muhammad was born in Mecca. It was a trading city between the heart of Byzantium in the north and its kingdom in the south. Now, it's important for us to talk about Mecca. When you've seen on the news that big black cube-shaped building and all of these Muslims going around it in Mecca, that's like they think that's their oldest mosque, and they claim that to be the kind of the centerpiece, kind of like the temple would have been for Judaism and everything. Well, but here's a thing to know about that.
And you can't go there unless you're Muslim.
But that thing,
right?
I guess
you can't even go into Mecca. You have to take a separate road away from it, I think. If you're not Muslim, you have to go around the city.
Okay, well, that's a great contribution. Yeah. But that's called the Kaaba, and the Kaaba was actually everyone but Muslims knows that the Kaaba predates Islam. It was a pagan center of worship with hundreds of gods set inside of it, figurines and things like that. It was a pagan center for worship, and was so in Muhammad's day. Now, what Muhammad says about it is that that's where Abraham and Ishmael came and in their day and built this first place for Allah, and all that whole thing. But it's known to have been a pagan place of worship even prior to Christianity. Right. So anyway, that retconning again that you talk about, retconning something that was and saying it's yours. Yeah. Okay. His father, Muhammad's father and mother, died very young. His uncle, who was the political head of his clan, adopted him, and they traveled together around the area. Now that becomes interesting because he saw, as he traveled around the area, the superiority of the monotheistic beliefs of Christianity and Judaism, and I would agree with him because monotheism is true, right? Yeah. Okay, but what about Islam itself? Anything to add so far?
I just want to comment that I don't think that what I said was a great contribution. I think you overstated that to try to make me feel better.
Well, I mean, I do what I can, all right? You win some, you lose some.
But I know when you're doing it.
I have found in my life that anytime you don't know what to say, you win some, you lose some. Usually works. Just try it. All right, Muhammad and the origin of Islam. When he was in his mid-20s, he was the head of a caravan group for Khadijah, a widow who later became his wife, though she was 15 years older than he was. At 40 years old, he had a vision that he later identified as the angel Gabriel. Muslims call this the night of power. Now, as we know, and it is a point of great controversy, but it is absolutely demonstrable that Muhammad thought that he was experiencing demonic oppression when he first began to experience these visions. They were monotheistic verses, and so Muhammad thought he was losing his mind and wondered if he was being drawn to either Judaism or Christianity. He shared this with his wife, who then took him to talk with her Christian cousin, Waraka ibn Nafal. She said, this is why Christians need to know what they believe. Whether you live in the 600, listen to me, people who live in the 600s AD. Whether you live in the 600s AD or live in the current world, you need to know what you believe. She said that the whole thing sounded like the way that God dealt with the other great prophets. It was her belief that Muhammad was receiving his calling. His closest friends also agreed that he was receiving a calling from God. Nevertheless, those in Mecca were not sympathetic. Now, here's where it gets really interesting because, as I told you, Mecca was not, Islam hadn't been born yet. And Mecca was a place where pagan worship was taking place. And in fact, this is an interesting thing. If you start preaching against the pagan teaching that was going on at the Kaaba in his day, you were really messing up a tourist attraction on the road between two great cities. because everybody stopped there and did their little pagan god touristy thing, and it was a financial benefit to the town.
Right.
Okay,
So you're upsetting that. You're upsetting the economy.
right? Yeah, it's not just that you're upsetting their religious sensibilities. You're doing that, but you're also hurting the pocketbook. In 619, Muhammad's wife and uncle died. This meant that those who wanted Muhammad dead felt free to accomplish that task. During Muhammad's hiding, by the way, this is when, and this is going to come up later, this is when, like, we know that well, let me just continue. Daily, Muhammad began to receive revelations of the Quran. Now, at a certain point, Muhammad starts teaching this. Teaching, and he wants his tribe to become Muslims, basically.
Right.
So there is this teaching in Islam called shirk. If you commit shirk, that's like the highest blasphemy, and this is like the unforgivable sin. However, he begins, and one of the things that qualifies you for shirk is if you teach that there are other gods besides Allah. And under the pressure of the crowd, he actually pointed to 3 of their pre-existing gods in the community as, yeah, you can pray to them and they'll just take your prayers on up to Allah, which he realized later meant he had committed shirk himself as the prophet of Islam. Whoops. So what does he have to do? Now he has to say, well, Satan jumped in during my interpretive process and inserted that, and so it had to be erased, later on. So when you're talking about is Muhammad a qualified prophet, not even according to Islam is he a qualified prophet because he committed shirk.
Whoops.
Yeah, whoops, right? Okay. I don't think we need to go much further into the history. These are just some things that. What about their beliefs about the Old and New Testament? Well, the Old and New Testament were given by God according to Islam, but they've been monkeyed with by, proactive Christians and Jews.
Same claim as the Mormons. We just keep running into these same claims.
Problem is that the Quran says that God's words will never be changed, so it's a little bit of a problem there.
A lot of whoopsies here.
Yeah. Okay, let's skip a lot of this. What about Jesus? Jesus was a miracle worker who ascended to heaven at the end of his life. Jesus was never crucified.
Except for now, they're trying to wiggle out of that one.
Yeah, now you got people. Yeah, now people like Shabir Ali are trying to, giving the old. They're still saying
they do what a lot of some of our friends do in the evangelical world. They try to put the Bible into an exegetical torture chamber and waterboard it.
Yeah,
that's what they're doing with the Quran here.
Yeah,
and they're waterboarding the Quran to get around this because they can't just keep quoting, because Muslim apologists will typically quote a lot of liberal scholars, Bart Ehrman and people like that, to try to discredit the New Testament and the resurrection narratives and the crucifixion narratives. And so you can't keep quoting these scholars who all, by the way, do believe that Jesus died. They don't believe he rose from the dead, but he did die. But you can't quote them for sources and then say, yeah, but they're wrong on this because of the Quran. So It makes them look, okay, then why are you trusting these scholars if you can't just pick and choose like that?
Muslim convert to Christianity, Abdu Murray, who spoke at a conference with me last year, was talking about how when he was still a very zealous Muslim, he would always use Bart Ehrman. Bart Ehrman was his favorite guy. To use against Christians.
Right, but then
you got guys like that who affirmed the death by Roman crucifixion of Jesus.
Yeah, and then you're like, okay.
You're cherry picking evidence.
Right. And so
confirmation bias.
Now you've got, and this came out in a debate recently with David Wood and Shabir Ali, where he was like, yeah, you've got people like Shabir Ali now who are waffling on this whole thing. And they're trying to find some sort of way to eisegete their way out.
Well, I don't know what Shabir Ali is saying today, but I know that in the past what he's done, and this was out of step with what a lot of Muslims had previously done, but he would say, and this is like in his debate with one of his debates with Craig, he argues the old apparent death theory, that Jesus did go, yes, to the cross, but he didn't die there. He was, revived later and blah, blah, blah.
Well, I remember I may get... He didn't believe it, but he may have been referencing other Muslim scholars who are trying to wiggle their way out of this one.
Maybe. That may be. I remember Craig responding like, what are you talking about? That's not Islam. And he kept quoting the Quran that says he did not die they did not crucify him.
Right.
Well, then Shabir Ali was trying to say, well, they did not crucify him doesn't mean he didn't go to the cross. It just means it wasn't successful. And Craig's like, it says they did not crucify him.
Right. That means a specific thing, yeah.
But anyway, but what about Jesus? Miracle worker, never crucified. Islam teaches that Jesus is not the incarnate God. He is not a savior. These were mistakes or additions by later scribes, according to Islam. Muslims claim that when Jesus speaks of the coming comforter, he's not referring to the Holy Spirit. He's referring to Muhammad. Okay?
Yeah, no.
All right, let's look now at what some of these YouTubers and articles have to say. Now, as I said before, you would suspect that with a religion this big, that we would find a lot of really great evidential argumentation.
And be as excited as the two Hindu kids, or something. None of that either.
Yeah. Now, what you get in most of these. Now, I'm not saying there aren't guys out there that argue like Shabir Ali and other people, but here's what I am saying. Of the stuff that shows up on YouTube and in articles that get floated around, even who's the guy?
I mean, you weren't after the lowest hanging fruit there was.
No, I was trying to find some. Who's the guy that's the famous liberal Muslim guy? Reza Aslan. Reza Aslan. Yeah. People love that guy. Even his article was basically like, hey, it works for me. I think it's true, but just kind of because it works for me kind of thing. Yeah. Symbolism, we need stuff like that. We need faith, blah, blah, blah.
He is an abysmal New Testament guy. He tries, and I don't know how...
You may know more about him than I do.
Yeah, he's been around for a while, actually. I remember him before he got his doctorate. He was still writing and publishing stuff, and I was at Pulaski Technical College. We had a professor there who was wanting us to take, in our world religions class, wanting us to take Reza Aslan seriously. And I'm like, well, he's not a scholar. And he's just making stuff up about the historical Jesus. And then after he got his PhD, his scholarship never improved. So I have to wonder about some of these institutions that just award these, because everyone has raked him over the coals for the stuff he's trying to pull now, and talking about the historical Jesus. It's just, and he's been doing that since before he was on anyone's radar.
I was in Canada not too long ago, and
but Reza Aslan's terrible.
That came up to me after the thing, and there's people all around. I meant to tell this in a previous episode, but I don't think I did. There's people all standing around, and this guy says to me, "You don't really believe Christianity." And I just given a talk about the truth of Christianity, apologetics. I was like, yes, I do. He's like, well, you don't have any evidence. And I was like, I just stood up there and gave you 4 arguments for God's existence in a resurrection case. Yes, I think there's evidence for it. He's like, yeah, but he's like, answer me this question. This is what I want you to answer. Is this book, the Bible, is this book a book of history or a book of faith? Yes or no? And I was like, well, it's not that simple. And he says, no, yes or no. See, you can't give me a yes or no answer. And I was like, no, I'm saying it's not that simple because you didn't phrase it as a yes or no question. You said, is it a book of history or a book of faith? And I said, but now that I think about it, yes, it's a book of history and a book of faith. And he said, what do you mean? I said, it's different genres in the Bible. There's all kinds of different genres. Which part of the Bible? Which book? It's like me pointing at a bookshelf with all kinds of different literature and saying, is that stuff historical or is it, poetry? Well, which book? There's a lot of book up there, So a lot of books. So we talked about it, and he was like, well, but you really believe that the earth is only 6,000 years old? And I said, no, I don't necessarily know that. And the Bible doesn't teach how old the earth is. He's like, that really threw him because his only exposure to Christian apologetics was like Ken Ham type stuff. Not knocking Ken Ham, but I'm just saying that was his only exposure to it. And he was totally taken aback. But he said at the end of the discussion, well, I'll tell you what, you just need to study Reza Aslan because if you do, it'll fix all this stuff for you.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Who no one takes seriously except for a bunch of fringe weirdo.
But Reza Aslan's a Muslim. Did you know that?
Okay.
I'm just saying that's why we're talking about Reza Aslan.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying. That doesn't up his.
Doesn't make him more credible, right?
It makes him less credible.
Right. So I got basically 2 answers from most people. One answer is the answer that's kind of just a flighty. Well, I'll give you an example. This was in the Huffington Post by Lisa Suhay, founder of the Norfolk Initiative for Chess Excellence. Okay, and it's called "A Leap of Faiths." Plural, why I became a Muslim in 2017. And I just took a little tiny paragraph from this because it was a big, long thing, but there was only one thing The article is why I became a Muslim. But there's only one little thing, okay?
Of why she actually became
Yeah.
a Muslim.
Yet sitting in a plastic chair, this is like when she went to the mosque, yet sitting in a plastic chair on the linoleum floor watching the women on the rug pray, a feeling broke over me like a rogue wave that hits you, soaking you through, when all you had intended was to dip your toes in the ocean. It was startling, refreshing, and awakening. I still don't know why. Okay, that's a problem.
Right.
It's a feeling, and I don't know why I got it.
Burning in the bosom
Right,
stuff.
right. On my second visit, I felt more of a pull, an undertow maybe. She's hanging with the oceanography metaphors, right? Or perhaps it was a lifeline, inside my chest that ran from somewhere behind my heart, directly to the corner of the room where a laminate plastic sign said Qibla, or Mecca. A new acquaintance, now a friend, Saher, motioned for me to come sit on the carpet with her. When the Rakat prayers started, she whispered, "Just follow." The moment my forehead first touched the carpet, I was home. I felt it as surely as if a reboot button, she's mixing metaphors, button in me had been pressed, and I reverted to my factory setting. That's an interesting thing. I don't know if you know this. I didn't know it until I prepared for the class, the major world religions class, that Muslims often don't call it converting to Islam, but reverting, because everyone is born already a Muslim. It's just that they get polluted by the thinking of man, and so when you become a Muslim, if you weren't previously a Muslim, you're reverting, not converting.
It's like recollection of Plato.
Yeah, there you go. So, all right, so what am I supposed to respond to here? There's a feeling, there's a burning in your bosom. What have we repeatedly said about Mormonism, maybe Scientology, maybe some of these other groups?
Yeah, that was bad Chinese food. You're having heartburn.
Right, that's one possibility. Another possibility is, does our worldview account for people getting absolutely real spiritual/supernatural feelings and stuff, experiences
yeah.
that aren't necessarily from God, right? Demons, yeah. So we would expect that the enemy is not passive to you accepting a false
religion. If you're in a mosque and
religion.
you're setting yourself up for false religion, that's going to happen, right? And we do believe that Christianity is true and all other religions are false. So of course,
Right.
Sorry.
Absolutely convinced of it, and not just because of our feelings and experiences.
Right. I don't have any. So.
You don't have any feelings.
So it's not about feelings for me.
Yeah, you have no feelings.
None.
Okay.
I'm a robot. You made me a robot.
Okay. Now, but what is the other reason that I heard from people? You'll hear a lot of times that the Quran is demonstration that it is from Allah because it is so perfect, has no contradictions, and in Arabic anyway, is the most beautiful literature that's ever been made. And often the argument goes among Muslim thinkers is God speaks to people miraculously in the way that would be most impressive to them in their context. So in ancient Egypt, where it was like these magic people, like doing their little magic stuff, like we see in Exodus with their doing the little magic tricks and stuff like that in front of Moses. How did God speak? Well, he spoke through stuff that was similar to that, but bigger. Okay, in the same way, in Jesus' day, what was it? Well, it was healings and stuff like that. Okay, so in the days of when the Quran was written, the way that this is how they tell it, that people were most impressed by beautiful literature. So the most beautiful literature that has ever been written was written, and that's demonstration that it's from Allah.
The claim is that it's the most beautiful literature ever written. See, I'm glad that Christians don't claim that about the Bible, because there are poems written, like love poetry, that are better than Your Nose is Like a Tower. Okay?
Well, that's culturally contextual. That might have been what really got people going.
Right, but it's still not the most... I'm sorry. The Bible is the most important book ever written.
Well, absolutely.
But I'm glad we don't run around claiming that, because that claim, if you can demonstrably show that that claim is false, you can do the same thing with the Bible. Now, of course, with the Bible, we also say that
and it's subjective too, isn't it? Like what we just said, whoever wrote Song of Solomon obviously believes that that's the most beautiful
I think
thing.
beauty is objective, but I think your
but you're not God, so you don't.
Your preferences are going to be subjective. You're going to have subjective preferences. So I'm not going to go home to my wife and say your nose is like a tower, for example.
Well, right. But what I'm saying is, looking at the Quran, whether or not that is beautiful literature is going to be somewhat subjective. Yeah. If your life has been changed by the Quran, we'll get to that later. Whether that means it's true, it doesn't. We won't get to it later. I just solved it. But if your life has been changed by the Quran and you look at it and you think of that life change or whatever, it may be the most beautiful literature to you. Now, so it's somewhat subjective.
But the other claim Christians do make about the Bible, they claim there's no contradictions. Christians claim there's no contradictions, and of course people have attacked the Bible and saying...
Right,
yes,
that's a much more important claim for dealing with. Right. Let's get to the Quran itself. Surah 4, verse 82 says... Do they not consider the Quran, like with care? Like, are they not being careful considering the Quran? Had it been from other than Allah, they would surely have found therein much discrepancy. Okay, so this is great now. We're getting an evidential claim. First of all, the Quran is telling you very early on, this book, it doesn't, there's not much discrepancy, right? Okay, if it's from Allah, shouldn't there be like no discrepancy, you know?
Unless Muhammad's possessed by a demon.
Right. So there should be no discrepancy, and we can actually take a look at it and see, is there much discrepancy, right? Now, there's a couple of things that you hit on that I want to bring out in Technicolor. Something being written without errors does not mean that it's from God.
Right, because you can have a phone book of 25 names in a small town and it'd be fine.
Right.
And have no errors.
Believe it or not, we can write a book without errors. I have a video on the channel about this. It's a sermon I preached at a church somewhere. But Norman Geisler's been making this claim for decades. We could put a math equation. Do you know there's some math PhDs dissertations that are like multiple pages long? They're a book, but they are one long equation. And if every little mark is not absolutely right, it doesn't compute. So it has to be perfect. Moreover, we could write a paragraph that's perfect, or even just take math. 1 + 1 = 2. 2 + 2 = 4. And do a whole book worth of that. Right. One thing per page.
Inerrancy is important, but it's not the most important.
Doesn't prove that it's from God.
Right. Inspiration is more important for Christian doctrine than I think, and authority of Scripture is more important than inerrancy. Right. Inerrancy, I agree with John Frame, and maybe we should start doing more theology so we can talk about this more. But I agree with John Frame that you root inerrancy not in your doctrine of Scripture, but really in the doctrine of God. If it's God's word, does God err? You know, that kind of thing. So, and then of course, if you go through the various statements on inerrancy, the most famous being the Chicago Statement on Biblical Inerrancy. You qualify that in a number of different ways. And so my question is, how do they handle when we point out the contradictions? Are you going to address that?
How they respond to these contradictions? Yeah. No, but it's obvious to see how they would interpret it. In some cases, they'll say, "Well, that was just a metaphor." I'll give you some examples. Okay. But let's take a look at some of the alleged discrepancies in the Quran, okay? And we'll get a feel for it. Some of it just there's not a way. I don't know how they would respond to this, okay? And by the way, some of this list is stuff that I have created for the course that we teach, or that I've gathered from sources all over the place, because the debate is old, right? But the first few I'm going to give you are from David Wood. I think you should absolutely subscribe to David Wood's Acts 17's Apologetics.
His YouTube channel is wonderful. Right now he's doing, 30 days of Islamicize Me, where they take a different tenet of Islam and they try to live it out. And so far, it's
hilarious.
Yeah.
Don't watch it with kids around.
Yeah, but what's interesting the most is on his Facebook page, he'll post all the death threats he gets from this.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
Yeah. He's gotten several since he started. Of course, he's been getting death threats since he...
But he does things like, he had a recent video where there was this thing going around that cats won't step on the Quran. Like, there's something special about it. They will not step. And there's these YouTube videos where people, look, my cat just stepped over it or around it or whatever. And he's like, let's try it. So he gets all these Qurans and puts them in a, and then the cat just steps all over it to get to the food that David put in the middle of all the Qurans. And then they're like, oh, because it wasn't in Arabic. And he's like, okay, here's all Arabic Qurans. The cat still steps all over. You know, he does stuff like that. It's provocative.
Don't make claims that are so demonstrably disprovable. Right. I mean, And sometimes Christians.
I was
might
about to
do
say
this.
Christians do stupid stuff like that
Right.
too.
But a cat.
But I've never seen a cat won't step on the Bible.
Huh?
I've never seen one that's the cat won't step on the
Right.
Bible. Right.
I can't keep my wife's Bible. Our dog Oliver used to try to gnaw on that. Our devotional book.
Trying to devour the Word of God.
Yeah, I mean, literally. So I mean, pet animals will whatever,
Okay, so here's a list from David
Don't
Wood.
make dumb claims that are just.
How long did it take Allah to create the universe? Well, 6 days according to Surah 7, verse 54. 8 days according to Surah 41, verses 9 through 12. Not much of a way to, spackle over that. How did Allah create? What did?
So did Solomon have 4,000 stables, or did he have 40,000?
Yeah, but it's okay because we don't mind.
We're like scribal error.
Yeah, we can actually
They
say
don't
scribal
have-
error.
they
They're
don't
like,
have-
no, it's the same as it was back then, and it's in Arabic. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's the problem when you're trying to say that every single. Textual criticism. I know it's complicated, but that's actually our friend, right? As a discipline, because we know that we have the original text somewhere in the enormous amount of copies that we have from antiquity that no other ancient document comes close. But when you're trying to claim everything is Xerox, basically, then you can't punt to anything.
right. That's right.
So it's actually, when people say, well, you have so many copies and there's so many discrepancies, don't get intimidated by that. First, Christians say, amen, yes, because that's a benefit to our thing. That's a plus to our thing, that we have that much attestation and that much, we have the original text somewhere and all that, and we can get really, textual critics are good at what they do. You even asked Bart Ehrman, after making all these claims about all these errors, he's like, yeah, I mean, it's pretty much what it is.
Yeah.
When you ask a point blank, how solid is it? Yeah, 98, 99%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but if you don't have that luxury,
Yeah.
if your claim is it's Xerox, you shoot yourself in the foot.
Right. You can't even lie properly. Not that we're lying, but they can't even.
Right. You don't. Yeah.
Okay. What did Allah create first, the heavens or the earth? Well, according to Surah 2, verse 29, it was the earth. According to Surah 79, verses 27 through 30, it was the heavens. Okay? Who was the first Muslim? According to Surah 6, verse 14, it was Muhammad. According to Surah 7, verse 143, it was Moses. First prophet in Arabia. According to Surah 2, verses 125 to 129, it was Abraham and Ishmael. According to Surah 28, verse 46, it was Muhammad.
Yeah, so this is not
not stuff that's
were at the
interpretive.
tomb.
Yeah.
One or two. Well, if you have two, you
Right.
have no way to.
This is why I told you,
Yeah, if you have
let's
two,
just
you have one.
wait till I unpack them and you'll see.
I mean, this
okay.
is-
Shirk is unforgivable. Surah 4:48. Shirk is forgivable. Surah 4:153. Jews and Christians will be accepted by Allah. Surah 2:62. But Surah 3:85, the only religion that's accepted by Allah is Islam. Okay, so these are flat contradictions.
Right, and in literary genre, this is not like you can't. These are propositional statements.
Right.
I mean, it's not like there's a narrative, so obviously the narrative is going to have
Right.
different directions. So
Right.
This is propositional statements.
So I've given you a bunch here,
Yeah.
and the Quran itself tells us that there shouldn't be much discrepancy. If Allah wrote it, well, how much is much, right? I just gave you a bunch,
that
and
the-
more is on the way. What about scientific claims? Now, here's where it does get a little like they can try to say something on some of this, okay? Surah 23:14 tells us that humans are formed like an embryo is a clot of blood. Okay.
Okay, and in Arabic, this is beautiful prose.
Right. Well, I don't know. It's like they say the most beautiful phrase in the English language is cellar door, but you have to say it in a British accent. Cellar door. Maybe clot of blood is the equivalent of cellar door in Arabic or something. I don't know. Who knows? There are Muslims. Okay, there were Muslims who will point out that even if you don't because an embryo is not a clot of blood, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you could say, well, that's a long time ago, and they didn't have terms for some of this sorts of. Okay, well, what about semen? Right? Did the Quran talk about semen? It sure does. It does speak of semen specifically, and it does so in Surah 86, 6 through 7. But this is what it says: that semen is formed between the backbone and the ribs. Now, that's not where semen is formed,
No.
right? It's just a scientifically false claim.
Right.
Right? Okay. Surah 1886, this is a famous one, claims that the sun sets in a spring of murky water. Now, what they will try to say is that that's a reflection. No, they'll say that it was a reflection of the sun is in the pool of murky water, so it appears as though the sun is setting, and that's what was meant by that. Yeah. Problem is, and I don't have the quote right in front of me, but
phenomenological language, right?
Yeah, but
that's what they're punting to.
Yeah, okay. but here's the problem. I don't have it in front of me, and I should have, but it just occurred to me now. But elsewhere, it's clear that Muhammad thought that he meant it actually sets in a pool of murky water.
He interpreted it literally.
Right. Okay. Stars are missiles God shoots at demons. Surah 37. Wait, I don't have this.
That's
right.
actually pretty cool.
Yeah, well, it would be cool. I don't have the. Let's see. I'll have to get that and put it in the show notes or something. But you might say, well, missiles. What? Well, the idea was that whatever you want to call it, missiles is a fine term. Yeah. These were being shot at demons, so they don't.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, cool it may be, but this brings us back to one thing I want to say about all this, and this is a good point to say.
That's the only thing that I've been like. I could read a book about
you could create some fiction there, fan fiction.
Right. I mean, but so far, no. I mean, if your claim is this is the greatest literature ever, finally an action sequence.
Yeah.
But other than that,
Well, it's
everyone's a critic. I get it.
There's two places. Surah 67:5 is one of the places. Okay, but
I mean, it's not as cool as like some of the ways Yahweh killed people in the Old Testament, though.
Right.
I mean, opening up the ground and swallowing people, drowning them. There's a lot of.
But here's the thing: is it true, or do we now know what shooting stars are? They're asteroids. They're getting caught up in our atmosphere and burning up.
Okay, but in fairness to them, it can do both.
An asteroid could kill a demon?
Maybe.
That's another show, demonology.
Right.
Are the Muslims right on this?
Well, no.
If they got this, is the only thing they got.
No, just because it's a natural event. Okay, the deaths at Korah.
Not the only thing they got.
It was a earthquake can open up and swallow people. Okay, that's a natural event, but it also served the purpose of judgment.
Okay, so you're gonna stand by the position that it is possible, it is theoretically possible, because we don't know for sure, that those asteroids could also be devices that Yahweh uses to kill demons.
Or I think is it not possible, but cool if it was.
Okay, but now that's where I want to get back to.
Okay.
There is a logical fallacy that Muslims are falling prey to.
Right.
We've already talked about a couple, confirmation bias being one of them. Yeah. But when they use barred airmen people. But here's another one. It's called the design fallacy. Mm-hmm. And the design fallacy, as you know, Dr. Pritchett, is when you think something to be true because it's so beautiful or so well designed, or it'd be so cool if it was true, right? So the whole case that the Quran is true because it has no contradictions, disproven, all right? But if that were true, that is a design fallacy. It must be true because it's so beautiful, right? Mm-hmm. I have said this a lot of times when I teach on this in the class, that I watched it recently. I don't think it held up well, but the Robin Williams movie from the late 90s called What Dreams May Come was a movie that involved aspects from various religions, but it has reincarnation and things, and it has a depiction of heaven and hell and all that. And I got news for you. It is really beautiful. It is a beautiful... You ever seen that movie? Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful film.
Yeah, like the art design and the set design.
Yeah, the way they picture heaven, the way they picture
and the way they picture hell is written really well.
And the story
is Dante,
cool.
But, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it's gorgeous, and the story is beautiful too. Like, it's beautiful on every level, except for one. It's false, right? And just because it's beautiful doesn't mean it's true. Right. And this is kind of what I get from some people in watching these videos while I'm a Muslim. Well, it has this beautiful aspect to it, and it just made so much. And guess what? There's people that come to Christianity for that same reason. And you know what? Well, you happen to be right. So thank goodness for that. That you came to Christianity because it was beautiful, and you happen to get the right one. But if that's the only reason, that's not a good reason for that to be the only reason.
You need to watch the show for more reasons why you should be Christian.
Right.
And we have to do our why I'm a Christian.
We will. Yeah. We will. All right. Was Muhammad a prophet? Okay, here's where we're almost done. Let's get over to... I don't ever have to say we're almost done because they can see the thing. But the person of Muhammad... Okay, according to the Quran...
No, it disappears. The bar disappears, and you actually, when you're watching it, it goes away. Oh, yeah. You never know where.
And people listening by podcast, they're not paying attention.
You either have to touch the screen on a phone or jiggle your mouse or something. So you never know.
Yeah. The person of Muhammad. The nature of a prophet is, according to the Quran, someone of impeccable character and basically sinless. Now, we should say that sin in Islam is not quite the way we picture it in Christianity. Some things that we would call sins are small enough that they just be mistakes or something, and a prophet might make some mistakes. But sinless, is he sinless? Is Muhammad sinless? Well, don't take our word for it. Take his. Muhammad prayed to Allah to forgive him of his sins. Okay, so if you got to have sinless prophet, we don't have that in Islam. So if you want a good prophecy from a real prophet, you're gonna have to look elsewhere. We talked about the satanic verses already. Doesn't sound like a prophet. Sounds like someone who committed shirk.
Now, who's their Mike Licona? And don't say Shabir Ali, because I bring up Mike Licona for an interesting reason. Because Mike Licona makes the point that, I mean, you can confirm the resurrection apart from Scripture, right? As far as, you don't have to assume everything that Orthodox Christians assume about the Bible, just a historical case, right? Mm-hmm. Let's just look at historical facts, and let's treat it like that. Let's not pretend that the Bible's inerrant and all of that stuff. Let's just look at it historically. Now, what's their case? Because their case, how do they create a historical case?
What they'll say about this particular issue, because I can only take it case by case. Yeah. What they say about this particular issue is that Muhammad, and all we're needing to do here, or the best we can do, is inference to the best explanation. Does this sound like their answer is right, or does it sound like you're trying to cover something up? Sure. And their answer is he was just trying to model for everybody else the attitude they ought to have.
Even if he
was sinless. Or some will say maybe even though Muslims often think that this means that God protected his prophets even when they were children from sin, maybe he's just making sure he's covering his bases, that before I was a prophet and everything else, I'm just making sure I'm good.
Okay.
But does that sound like someone? All I can ask you to do is judge that based on what it sounds like to you.
Now, do they have the Muhammad never existed people? Because we have we have the Richard Carrier people.
You mean, like, what do you mean? Outside of Christianity or within Christianity?
No, I mean
outside of Islam or within Islam?
Outside of Islam, is there?
I'm sure there are, but I'm not one of them. I think he existed.
Right. I mean, I do too, but I mean, are there people? I don't know.
That's a good question.
I was wondering. Richard Carrier, since you're not getting anywhere convincing anybody with your bad arguments, try something else.
He may have already said that. I don't know. Yeah. He'd be the one to say it.
Well, he's so uninteresting and has nothing to offer that we don't pay attention to him. So.
Yeah, I can't say that because I have paid attention to him.
I haven't in years. I think I saw a debate with him and William Lane Craig. I was like, I like his curly hair.
Yeah, I mean, it's a look, that's for sure.
I don't have curly hair, so I'm all,
You appreciate curly hair.
I have to find something nice. I just told him his color.
He has hair, is what I appreciate. Okay. Inconsistency in polygamy laws. It's just a known fact that Muhammad got revelations for himself about how many wives he could have, even though there were different, and there was also you have to be with each wife in order and all that, and not skip around based on your preferences. He got a special prophecy that he was allowed to do that.
This is the thing with, even in the Old Testament with David and Solomon, and this polygamy thing.
Why do you want more than one wife?
Who could handle more than? I love my wife. She is wonderful. I only want one.
And she's enough. That's all you need to say.
Yeah, and she's
enough for you.
She's enough.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that she sometimes can, can you imagine having like a bunch of women around?
I think what you mean to say, Solomon had 700 wives, and you would not prefer to have 700 mother-in-laws. That's what you're trying to say.
No, I would prefer to not have 700 women in my house.
Yeah. I'm trying to help you out of what sounds like it could be a trepidatious comment.
No, my wife is phenomenal, and she's the only one I would ever want because, and I have a daughter too, and you've got 2 daughters. You are the only male in your house besides.
Oh, Indiana. Yeah. The dog.
To me.
We named the dog Indiana.
Right. and to me, it's like, I don't get these guys who want multiple wives around.
I don't get it either.
But and then to say, okay, but I can have them, but you can't.
Right.
You know, to go on top of that is like, it's like, why don't you share the misery? You know,
So
it seems like a punishment for people. Oh,
I do think but you got to remember, they were not, the women's lib movement had not yet kicked in, right? Yeah. Okay, let's finish up because we're running out of time.
Well,
and
it had
power.
in the New Testament. I mean, the treatment of women in the church was far and away revolutionary for its
Amen.
time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it seems like this goes back the other way.
What about Allah? And we got to do this quick, okay, because we're running out of time here.
Okay.
But what about the nature of Allah as God? So we've talked about the Quran, we've talked about Muhammad. Let's talk about Allah. The Quran teaches in Surah 6:12 what we call philosophical voluntarism. God does not do what is right. What God does is right, or it becomes right. You know.
And sadly, we have too many Calvinists that sound like this too, because they're not philosophically sophisticated enough, maybe. But don't say that whatever God does.
I had a guy in my major world religions class say to me in the comments section,
it becomes right because God does it, right?
Right.
That's not the Christian claim.
Right. I had a guy in my major world religions class in the discussion forum say, I disagree with Dr. Hunter about this. No, whatever God wants to do, he does it and it becomes right.
Right.
But whatever God wants to do, we say, is going to be right, not because it was sinful before and now it became right, but because goodness is with his nature.
And every action he makes is consistent with his nature. So don't make the claim that whatever God does becomes right because God did it. That's not Christianity.
Right. Okay.
But it is Islam, and it's horrible. So...
extreme determinism. God is the one who leads astray. This also gives you the voluntarism evidence of it. God is the one who leads astray and the one who guides. He is the compeller and tyrant and haughty.
And again, I debated some Calvinists who couldn't make a case worth a flip in our debate how to distinguish between.
But you debated some specific kind of Calvinists who were like, we are not compatibilists, we are determinists, right?
Yeah, and then somebody asked rightly, what's the difference between that and fatalism, and they couldn't really give an answer. Of course, leads one astray. They believe that too.
Someone could ask, what's the difference between compatibilism and hard determinism?
Yeah.
Somebody's been waiting for an answer for a long time.
Right. Well, James White.
You know, Miguel Benitez is going to be upset that we're going off about this again.
No, I'm not saying Calvinists. I said some Calvinists.
And it's been a few episodes.
Yeah, and by the way, because we actually, or at least myself and Dr. Leighton Flowers, engaged people who said this stuff, I'm going to bring it up.
I did too.
It's in my experience.
I did too. Joe Myra said, free will is an illusion.
Right. So they asked us to debate. They wanted to make their thing popular. So I'm just saying there are some Calvinists who sound like Muslims when they're talking about their theology properly.
I'm sorry. All right.
I'm sorry for real Calvinists who reject that.
Hence, Muslim scholars cannot... Okay, this is a quote from Abdul Salib's Answering Islam and Norman Geisler. Hence, Muslim scholars cannot avoid the contradiction that God has logically opposed characteristics by placing them outside his essence within the mystery of his will. So God's doing, because of the voluntarism and the extreme determinism, he's doing contradictory things, back to he is the compeller and tyrant and haughty, but he's also all these positive things.
See, I want to.
He leads astray, but he leads rightly.
And you remember we had debates, or we had a discussion a few podcasts back where we were talking about. I know you don't want me to go off on this too long, but remember how we talked about we want to see the debate between the reforming America whatever guys and James White on the issue of compatibilism versus determinism. I'm wondering if there's Muslims who want to engage that debate on
with other Muslims,
with either other Muslims or even Christians. Not because we always get did Jesus rise from the dead? Is Islam true? Is Christianity true? Whatever. But just a philosophical debate about the nature of God would be very, very interesting.
I agree.
And something new that we.
I agree.
Then the same debate.
There is new stuff, though. Go check out David Wood. He has a whole thing with a Muslim apologist on is ISIS true Islam? And that's a pretty intriguing thing.
Everything that David Wood does is
pretty awesome. Okay, but he's not a member of the Trinity Commission, and all I can say in wrapping all of this up is that these reasons for why people are Muslims, because it feels right or whatever, and because I didn't even get into what I wanted to say about the Kaaba. Do you know that set in the side of the Kaaba is a stone that many Muslims believe is a stone that God gave Adam when he left? It was a chunk of heaven that by virtue of having it, he can get back to heaven. And that's that chunk of stone that's set in the side of the Kaaba. And one time I think Persians smeared some feces on it so that when people went up and kissed it or whatever, they got feces all over. I mean, there's all kind of interesting stuff we could talk about with this.
Well, until you got to the feces thing, I was like, oh, cool, more sci-fi stuff.
Cool stuff.
But
don't fall prey to the design fallacy.
Yeah, but you killed it with the rubbing the feces on it. So, but I mean, same thing happens when we talk about cigarettes in Old Testament. When you talk about Stairway to Heaven with Muhammad.
Yeah.
I have the Led Zeppelin song. I've had it running through my head this entire time since you said that.
Is the Quran free of contradictions? No, it is not. Is it free of scientific errors? No, it is not. Is it the most beautiful piece of writing in the world? Well, I guess what? I don't speak Arabic. From the people I know who do, no, it is not. So that kind of wraps that one up. We'll probably do more on Islam in the future with better responses from people, but this is what came up. All right, we'd love for you to become a student at Trinity College of the Bible and Theological Seminary, Trinitysem.edu. Please contact us today. If you think you might do it somewhere in the future, go ahead and fill out an eval. It's free. You can just do it on the website right there on the right-hand side, Trinitysem.edu.
Yeah, also be sure to check out our sister podcast, The Bible Throwdown with Matt Chisholm and Billy Winland, Soteriology 101 with Leighton Flowers, and Steve Gregg's The Narrow Path, all members of the Trinity Commission, all fantastic shows. And finally, say you want to learn casually, you can keep watching this. You can check out BraxtonHunter.com for more resources, and you can join the Ecclesia Scholar Society, where there's a journal that's semi-annually every year. Has lots of wonderful...
Don't have to be a Trinity student to do it.
Yeah. It's open for anyone. Academic types, ministry leaders, pastors, lay persons, whoever wants. There's a journal comes out, like I said. It's got wonderful contributions from scholars, from students, from people in the ministry. It's not just an academic, scholarly rag. It's got a variety of perspectives. So you can check that at Trinitysem.edu/Ecclesia, ECCLESIA. Go check that out.
And if you want to be a patron, again, just click up here somewhere and become a patron. Or if you're on the audio podcast, patreon.com/Trinity Radio. And we'll see you next time on Trinity Radio.
If you would like more content, click here and keep watching. If you want to have Bible studies, click up here. Excellent commentaries on books of the Bible for you to enjoy and learn. And finally, we want you to subscribe. We need more subscribers, so click here.